Welcome back to Real Talk with Susan Stone and Kristina Supler. We are full-time moms and attorneys bringing our student defense legal practice to life with real, candid conversations. Today's topic is really a very fundamental topic because, as everyone knows, Kristina and I focus on helping students when they're in a crisis situation. But long after Kristina and I are able to help the student out of the crisis, we hear back from parents, and some kids bounce back and lead and go on to do better. And some kids, the crisis defines them. And it leads us to the question of resilience. So we wanted to have a podcast focused on that very topic because Kristina and I only see a small snippet of the crisis. We don't know the student before, and unless someone reaches back out to us, we don't know the after. So our guest is really the expert on the topic.
We're pleased today to be joined by Suzanne Schneps, who is a clinical psychologist in Cleveland, Ohio, who's been practicing for over 30 years. She works with children's, parents, and family units. Prior to her clinical work, Dr. Schneps' training was as an elementary school teacher and also a special education worker. She worked with children with cognitive challenges, learning differences, and a variety of mental health issues as well. This experience really informs Dr. Schneps' work with children and gives her a unique understanding of how academic and school issues impact a child's self-concept and overall well-being. Dr. Schneps is just the best.
I would have to agree, and I'll have to throw in, this is really scary. I met Dr. Schneps over 25 years ago already.
Wow.
Yeah, she is a consultant at my daughter's school, which is Hathaway Brown, an all-girl school, and she really made a big impact on creating an environment for resilience. So we have maintained our relationship all these years. And when you say she is the best. Might I also say her daughter, who is a psychologist.
Also the best.
Also the best. So can we give a shout out that not only are you great working with students, but you raised one heck of a daughter in that Jenny Walensky.
You know, I don't know whether I can handle all these positives, ladies.
Well, welcome. We're happy to have you today. Thanks for joining us.
So before we launch into a big discussion on resilience, Dr. Schneps, can you define the term so we're all on the same page what we're really talking about?
Well, Susan, I think you gave a good way to describe resilience to kids, but also adults. It's bouncing back. It's how are you going to handle the fact that life is not perfect, that life has handed you some things that are kind of challenging, and how are you going to respond so you move on with life? In the early years, we would do lots of little exercises where we would give a situation and we would literally have them jump up and down to show that they were bouncing back and being resilient. But it's figuring out a way to move forward so that the problem did not define you and did not weigh you down as you move forward in the future.
So resilience relates to being able to move forward. Let me ask you, can a child or an adult be successful without having resilience?
Well, I guess I would have to say that it depends on how you define being successful.
I felt that answer coming.
Oh my gosh.
Well, you walked yourself right into that.
Sure did.
Okay. You know, if you want to be miserable your whole life, it's kind of a choice. Okay. By my standards, you could probably have a more positive, forward-thinking, I might even use the word happier life. But if you're okay with it, that's really your choice.
Is that successful? I mean, seriously, I'm not just trying to play cute. If your goal is to be miserable and you achieve it, you're successful at that. So I don't think that's our definition.
Well, that's not our definition of a healthy mental health approach to life. So if we're saying that we want resilience and we want a happy, healthy life, that would be allowing the resilience.
I'm still struggling. I don't know why. Yeah, help me out here. Because when I think of success,
You're defining success, Susan and Kristina, by how you personally experience it. Okay. You are both very resilient people. Crisis is put in front of you. You actually live this in your work. You figure it out. You try to solve it, and then you move on to the next one.
Right.
Okay. But there are people in life who say, I don't want to do that. I'm okay being stuck. I don't want to move on. Misery's comfortable. I mean, it's not a healthy approach, but you can make that choice. What happens then is you become known as a negative person. You become known as somebody that half the world does not really want to be with, and you're miserable, but you can make that choice.
Would you agree then that being resilient is part and parcel of being successful?
Yes, I think it leads to being a moving forward adult and a moving forward child. Being resilient lets you continue on a path that's positive and on a path which we would define as successful rather than being stuck.
Dr. Schnepp, Susan and I tend to really only see students when they're in crisis.
At their worst.
Whether it's a school issue, a campus issue for kids in college, God forbid, an issue in the juvenile justice system. Would you agree that students are less resilient today than they've been in the past?
Yeah, because we really can't go by what we see. It's not fair. We don't actually, nobody calls a lawyer and says, just want you to know, my kid's doing great.
The kids are struggling more now. I mean, is that accurate, or what are your thoughts?
Okay, I think, could we separate two things?
Sure.
I do think kids have a great deal more to struggle with. I think that the world is much more complicated. Social media adds a great deal more pressure on kids. I don't know that I would say that they are less resilient today than they were in the past. I just think they have more to be resilient about.
Okay, but is that something every generation says? I mean, I'm sure the generation that was sending people off to the Vietnam War said this generation has more to deal with others, or take it back further. My mother was a Depression baby and first generation after the Holocaust. I think that generation, what makes this different?
Big issues versus, I wasn't invited to the party and I saw on Snapchat all my friends at a party.
Yeah, I just have a hard time with that.
Okay, so let's take a look at the following of when you're a kid. This is one of my favorite moments as a clinician because it helped to so define how an adolescent can see the world. I had this, it's really many years ago, actually. I had this kid, his father was in the hospital with some bizarre disease that they thought he was going to die. His grandmother had just died. His very favorite uncle had just died, all within a week. I saw him on a Friday. I saw him on a Saturday. I saw him on a Sunday. On Monday, he calls. It's a miracle. His father's fine. All's good, but he has another huge problem. You wouldn't have time for this kid? We were supposed to see each other. I said, sure thing. What's the deal? The big problem was he was a sophomore in high school, and it was homecoming, and he didn't drive yet. And did I think it would be embarrassing? He went to Beechwood, I actually remember, if his mother dropped him off at the corner of Fairmont and Richmond, and they walked the other way. But this was the big problem.
Touche.
So touche. I say it's not a big problem, Kristina. That I read on Snapchat that everybody went to the party and I didn't. But as a kid, it is a big problem. Okay. And they move from death, okay, right to the next big one.
You know what? That's so interesting because I was always raised with the cliche, little people, little problems, big people, bigger problems. But what you're saying is that's not true. You have to take the person where they're at. They're just as big at that point.
Yeah, it doesn't feel fair to minimize the problem in the life of the child just because, we as adults with our life history and experience say like, who cares? Move on.
This would be like all the times that people have said, you'll go to your high school reunion. It'll be your 20th reunion and you'll see that those people didn't amount to anything. They're popular ones, et cetera, et cetera. It's irrelevant when you're in the middle of your high school years. It's important to you in your middle school years. We have to take kids where they're at and what's important to them.
That's why she's the bomb.
That's right. That's right. Let's just jump to it. The big question here. What can parents do to build resilience in children?
We now have defined the problem. We want the solution.
Okay. Kids do not, emphasize not, capital bold, like to always be told what to do. They like to figure it out. And if we're teaching them to be resilient, it's asking them the question of, it's empathizing first. I mean, that's really awful, blah, 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 blah. What ideas do you have that would move you forward? But, you always have, and it's giving the positive vibe that that they can figure it out, and listening and hearing what they have to say, and then commenting on it and asking, sounds great. Can I give a tweak to it? Because sometimes you're going, oh my goodness, that needs a little help.
Oh, geez, that's not the way to move forward.
And sometimes you go, oh my gosh, that is not how to be resilient. You cannot go and punch him out on the playground. That's going to get us in real trouble. So then it's to say, well, let's think through the consequences of that choice. So it's engaging in a conversation. You are helping them to be resilient by giving them the message that they can figure it out.
Where I struggle is the line between sometimes you let them figure it out and sometimes it's a must do. So let me give you an example.
Okay.
My third was very, very nervous about driving. I'm a working mother, divorce situation. So getting that kid driving was really important to me. And and by the way, today she is a great little driver, but getting her through that anxiety and then finally saying, you're doing it. It's non-negotiable. How do you deal with the line of collaborating versus setting the non-negotiable?
Great question.
Okay. Well, first of all, I personally am a big fan of the word non-negotiable. Some things are non-negotiable. You have to go to school. It's non-negotiable. In your instance, your third child needed to learn to drive. It was non-negotiable. So there are a couple of pieces here. First of all, this is going to sound weird for the person that encourages people to talk. Sometimes as parents, we overtalk. We keep talking and talking and talking and we don't stop. Okay. It's enough already. Since I'm not a dentist, TMJ is a very good thing. Shut your mouth. Okay. Be quiet, because we are encouraging and fostering anxiety the more that we talk. We sometimes need to put a lid on it. Okay. And then in putting a lid on it, when it's non-negotiable, look for where there are some choices. Your daughter needed to learn to drive. Okay. So it's saying it's non-negotiable, but here's what you could choose. I found this driving school and this driving school. You pick. Talk to your friends. You thought they both were fine. What do you care? So it's giving choice where you can, but making it clear it's going to happen.
Sort of like potty training. It's non-negotiable that you need to potty train, but you can pick the princess underwear or the rainbow underwear.
Yes. Now, of course, you've walked yourself into such a complicated topic that we really won't go there because, toilet training is all about control. And the bottom line is you can say that, but they can choose to not want any of the underwear and we could have a problem. So we'll leave that one for another topic, another time.
Fair enough. Of course, being resilient, it doesn't mean that children aren't going to experience difficulty, pain, heartache. So what's the balance? That's life. And at any age, right? What's the balance between, I hear you when you're saying, don't over talk, let the kids be a part of solving and working through how to move forward. But what's the balance between letting your child work through the issue, feel the feelings, find a solution, and protecting your kid?
Yeah,
Okay, that's a very good question, actually.
I agree.
Here's where we protect our kid and step in. Number one, we step in when it's a safety issue. Parents always need to protect their kids with a safety issue. What defines a safety issue? Anything that will be harmful to them physically and anything that's significantly harmful to them educationally and emotionally. When people hire you, they know that their kid cannot navigate that system. Actually, they're having trouble navigating the system.
Oh, yeah.
So they are protecting their child by getting them what they need. And it's not a reasonable standard that some child should be able to do that. I think it's also taking into account developmentally where they're at. Your little third grader gets into a tiff with other kids and is fighting with them and gets called names and it doesn't go well and they cross boundaries and say inappropriate things. A mom can still call and see if she can navigate with another mother. But when you are a junior or senior in high school, that is not appropriate.
It's funny.
So we need to.
Yeah,
What?
I was just going to say, I was talking to a very dear friend, and it was a younger child where it got the name calling. I felt crossed a boundary, and my advice was pick up the phone and call the mother now. Don't let this continue. Would you have agreed with that?
Yes. Because the kid's little and we can help the kid with what to say, but not all of them can do it. And that's different than being 17 or 18 years old where we can role play, we can plan it, we can think about it, but they need to take care of some of it themselves.
Well, you know what? Look, we get a lot of calls from younger parents wanting me to sue school districts for bullying. And of course, it's a very, very complicated legal issue that, the school has to be first put on notice that there is bullying. But before we even get to something that would be defined as bullying, do you think there is a difference between just not being liked by peers and bullying?
That's a great question, and I'm so curious to hear your response, Dr. Schneps, because Susan and I often find ourselves in situations where we're having really hard conversations with parents. We're speaking as lawyers, and, sometimes I feel like a jerk, and parents are emotional and sharing with us their child's struggle, and we're like, sorry, legally, you don't have anything we can do for you, but best wishes. That stinks.
Okay, well, I think this is not going to be a popular view, but I think a little bit we are overusing the word bullying.
I totally agree.
Well, we agree.
Yeah.
You can say to me something like, oh my gosh, those are such ugly earrings. Why would you ever buy them and wear them? You look ridiculous. That's not bullying. That's being mean, you mean girls. That's not bullying.
Or brutally honest.
It's brutally honest. You don't like them. So they were not bad. But it's just plain mean. Okay. It's not bullying. And I, as a kid, need to learn, and that's where I would say the word resilience comes in. How do I handle those mean comments? And I think that it is, particularly in the early years, there is a tendency to do some of that mean kind of thing. You've been mean to me, I'm going to be mean to her. See how, and I'll play it out and see how that feels.
Hurt
and
people hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think parents need to help their kids with how to respond, which I guess would be being resilient, if people make mean comments. Now, what doesn't work in 2022, we're almost to 2023, you were probably told, the two of you, to ignore things. You can make one ignore and then you have to have a comeback.
No, not me. Not I.
Not you?
No. Actually, my parents basically said the only way to stop a bully or someone being mean is take them out in the playground and beat them up.
Well, that'll get you nowhere.
Kid kicked out of school today.
Yeah, I didn't come from the ignore it. But I also think that was from a family where, again, my parents were depression babies and lost all their extended family in World War II. So the whole thought of fighting back was very ingrained in them.
What about for educators, Dr. Schneps? We have teachers in our audience who listen and school administrators. In your opinion, what can the classroom teacher who's seeing and hearing the name calling, the looks, the heartache over exclusion, whatever it might be, what can the classroom teacher do to stop the bullying or intervene in a constructive way?
Well, I think there's a couple things they can do, Kristina. I think one thing is they can encourage I statements instead of saying, you did this to me, you did this to me. It's the, I felt this way. I experienced what just happened to me, and encouraged kids to do that and give them the opportunity to be able to practice it. I also think that they can encourage a form of mediation, which I will briefly define it. It's where you're smiling.
Well, just because Kristina and I many, many years ago, way before the pandemic, became certified in restorative justice. And we've just now, years later, see it.
Schools sort of embracing the idea. Well, let you answer. I'll let you finish your answer. I think we're talking about the same thing, but who knows? So what does mediation mean to you?
Okay. I've had a conflict with you, Kristina. Okay.
Horrible fight.
A horrible fight.
I can't stand it.
And in the best of all, Susan says she will help us do this because she's another kid. But if not, the teacher does. And first, I tell what happened, how I see what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And then you respond by saying exactly what I said. So if I say 2 + 2 = 8, you say Suzanne said 2 + 2 = 8. You do not change what I said. Then you talk and say what you think happened. And I again repeat it. And if you say 9 + 9 is 1, I have to say 9 + 9 is 1. And then the person that's helping us says, do either of you have a solution? And we look to see if there is a solution page put out there, and we discuss it. But what's happened is each person has really heard what the other person experienced. And for many, and for a large majority of the, what would we call them? More just they were mean and they were unkind, etc. It's easy to get the apology. It's easy to say, sure, the next time you can play with me and tag. It resolves a lot of the easier things relatively quickly. The more complicated kinds of things, it brings to the foreground the need for further discussion and some kind of plan of action to further that discussion.
So it sounds as though you're saying that what you've called mediation is really appropriate for children of all ages. It works quite well with the younger kids. Is that fair?
Well, actually, I could take it a step further. It works really well between parents and kids.
Aha. Oh, I love that. To really say, okay, to repeat back what you're hearing, and also to make sure you're framing the issue correctly.
Yes.
That's great.
I like it.
So when students do suffer a tragedy, and Lord knows the world does not lack tragedy, even if it's from, God forbid, the loss of a parent, any type of death, including, we have heard in the community this year, there were a number of young adults who died from fentanyl overdoses. So we know that really serious things are happening. And you have those remaining siblings, or even divorce. These are all...
It's a major trauma for children.
Really major trauma. At what point do you say grieving is good, but there's got to be some sort of, not to get all lawyerly with you, statute of limitations on the grieving?
Basically, life goes on. You got to move forward.
How do you do that?
So, ladies, there isn't a statute of limitations on grieving.
You cold, callous lawyer, you. The psychologist says, wrong.
That's why she's here.
What there is, ladies, is how are you going to manage it so that it doesn't, and it's interesting because you asked this when you say our topic is resilience. Okay. How do you manage it in a way that still allows you to move forward? But you can have, I lost a parent as a child, particularly 20 years ago, and you still can see a movie. Okay. We'll make it simple. And it brings up and taps into play that grief, and that's okay. You cried. But then you still were able to pull yourself together and go out and have some ice cream and share what it was and vocalize that it reminded you of your own situation that you've become comfortable with.
What I have done with my own children is insist that we all have to move forward, but also allow for space for them to talk about the past whenever they need to. I know the three of my children, and I'm not just sharing, but I will share with my readers, Suzanne has been incredible for my family. There's a way to incorporate it into your life. And that's the word I would use, that it's okay at dinner if they want to bring something up, or acknowledge where I, as a parent, could have helped them navigate better. And I use those opportunities to apologize and say, you're right. I wish that I could have handled that better. In hindsight, I wish I would have had the strength or the resilience, but I'm happy you're bringing it up now. But we still, at the same time, are moving on and have moved on.
You can move on at the same time that you can continue conversations. But you just brought up a really important thing, which I have to underscore. Never underestimate how much it means to a child to apologize. It means so much that you've owned your behavior. We ask them all the time to own their behavior. And it means the world to kids when parents own their behavior.
That's a really, really powerful point, I think, for our listeners to keep in mind. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And it just this idea of loss, death, divorce, illness, you name it, the struggles in life. How honest should parents be with children about the bad stuff in life, about the fact that life isn't always fair, the good guy doesn't always win. Maybe you worked really, really hard and still failed the test. How should parents handle basically the injustices of life when talking to their children?
Okay. I think parents need to be honest with their children. Kids hear and know far more than parents ever give them credit for. However, we need to do this in a developmentally sound way. So how we share with our little 6-year-old is different than how we share with our 16-year-old. They don't have the same cognitive abilities to understand things. And that would be in terms of both the world and what's happened, or something in the family that's happened. And then we want to encourage questions. A good way to kind of think about it is kids talk about, and we ask us questions about sex, and parents have become increasingly comfortable of adjusting those conversations to developmentally where they are. There are other really serious topics that they also need to do the same kind of adjustment, but they need to be honest. Now, it's another phrase that is helpful with kids is full disclosure is not always required. So I'll give an example. A mother goes for her mammogram and gets that horrible call that she needs another mammogram. Okay, we all know as women, this puts us into a real tailspin.
Scary time.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Okay, the mother does not need to share with her children, oh my God, I think I have cancer. Nobody said you have cancer. You have simply been told you need to have another mammogram. You want us to say, I'm going to have more tests? Fine. but you don't need to go to the nth degree because we don't have that information. Okay. You find out that the story is not a good one. You need to think about it, and that gets into a whole complicated thing, how to explain that, which we don't need to go to. But your kids do need to know, and they do need to know that you're going to have treatments, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That answering your question,
You're
Kristina?
doing a great job, but let's shift, and this is a timely topic of COVID, because I'm assuming we're going to head into the winter months. I don't know when this podcast is going to get played, and everybody has either had it or knows someone, and everybody has it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give a little piece of advice on what is the healthy way to talk about COVID? I mean, what I've been saying to my family is we'll deal with it, whatever it looks like. And right now, gosh, 1 out of 3 of my kids had it. I had it. But, it was tough. I will tell you my own COVID experience. It was really rough, and I was double vaxxed and double boosted. But, it was a bear.
And now on the news, all the reports are showing that, particularly among children, COVID, RSV, respiratory illnesses are on the rise, and pediatric hospitalizations have skyrocketed, and the healthcare system is getting bogged down again. And so, scary stuff. Not that we have to go into all those details with our kids necessarily, but be honest, be developmentally appropriate. So what are your thoughts on how to still discuss the lingering medical crisis?
So last night, my youngest granddaughter is actually ill. And she said, "Do I have RSV?" Well,
wow.
She's going to go to the doctor today. She doesn't have COVID. And then she says, and this is important, she says, "Alexa, is there a treatment for RSV?"
Wow.
Okay.
Technology.
So we need to realize that they have access to many resources that we don't think of. Okay.
Oh, Alexa.
So true.
And so in how to approach it is, I think first, there's so many pieces to this. But first is to say, in our family, we have done the following. In our family, everybody's vaccinated, and that helps. Now, if you're in a non-vaccinated family, you need to explain why you think that's a good idea. It's to say, we have good health care. We have people that will help us to navigate it. And it's to say, we're going to deal with what happens. We see, with COVID, the spectrum of how people experience it is vast. And just because you test positive, you might actually feel reasonably okay. We need to wait to see, and then we'll make a plan. I think that we've learned a lot of positive things, actually, which I know sounds weird, but I think that people are more sensitive to not being in public when they're sick.
I totally agree. I think in the workplace, employees we're all more sensitive to that. Like, if you don't feel good, stay home.
Yeah. And we're set up for it now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's I guess the most important message to a parent in terms of dealing with any of this is checking their own anxiety. Okay. And being sure that they're representing being calm, and that you have healthcare professionals out there that'll help you, and that it's, we've learned a lot, and it's going to be okay. You're going to figure it out, and reach out to the people that can help you.
Is there any question that we haven't touched on today that you think is important for you to tell our listeners about the topic of resilience?
One more thought.
Please.
I think it's an opportunity for you to model resilience. Kids like to see that grown-ups can handle what they have, and they don't need to know about every crisis that ever happens, but giving examples of how you've handled things and modeling resilience really gives a way for children to learn how to be resilient.
When you say modeling, do you mean just talking about it, or just
sharing our own problems with our children and how we worked through it? It's a great follow-up question, Susan. What do you mean by modeling, Dr. Schneps?
Okay, I don't mean sharing things that are going to make them anxious. Okay. But I'll give a made-up example. I think that kids like to know what's going on in our lives. And, you had a boss or have, and the boss really read you the riot act about what you did. And it was sharing with them, I didn't do a good job on that report. It made me feel awful. And then what I decided to do was rewrite it. And I decided to ask one of my coworkers to look at it. And then I returned it back in and got rave reviews, modeling, showing what you did to solve the problem and that you didn't cave and put yourself to bed for 5 days because somebody said you didn't write a good report.
Or how about when you just failed at something and you say, I did fail at that. I didn't get a good report, but life went on. Is that okay? Because we do fail.
Well, yes, I'm sure that you win 99.9% of your cases.
Always. Never lost.
Go your way. And to share with them that you felt really disappointed. You talk back and forth to each other. You tried to see if there was anything you could have done differently. You really didn't think there was. And you were really sad. And you realize that in what you do, you cannot win every single case. The same way that when your children apply to college in today's world, they may or may not get accepted.
Or maybe you're not going to go to Harvard, and that's okay. You'll go elsewhere, right?
But you can be really, really, really disappointed that you didn't get into Harvard. It was your life dream. And it's okay to be upset. But then you have to figure out which one of the many other opportunities works for you.
Well, Dr. Schneps, this has really been a joy to speak with you and pick your brain and talk through these parenting issues that I think that we've all experienced at some point in time, and many of our listeners are currently working through, or issues are on the horizon. So thank you so much for your time today and sharing your tips and your feedback and really practical advice for families working through issues and trying to do the best they can.
I was going to say Cleveland is really lucky to have you as one of our mental health resources. So yay us, right?
Yes.
Well, and thank the two of you for having me. And people are lucky to be able to work with the two of you as well.
Thank you.
Very kind. Thanks.
Very kind.
Thanks for listening to Real Talk with Susan and Kristina. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to our show so you never miss an episode. And leave us a review so other people can find the content we share here. You can follow us on Instagram. Just search our handle @StoneSupler. And for more resources, visit us online at studentdefense.kjk.com. Thank you so much for being a part of our Real Talk community. We'll see you next time.